The air above Telvor shimmered with oppressive heat as enormous alien vessels eclipsed the sun. The once thriving world, a masterpiece of crystalline spires and verdant jungles, was being torn apart. Fires consumed cities, rivers ran black with ash, and the skies thundered with the roar of the alien invaders, the Zalkar, as they laid waste to everything Telvorns held dear. At the epicenter of the evacuation stood Captain Kyle Dante, a man whose name once inspired admiration, but now bore the weight of impossible expectations. The planet's brightest minds had crafted the evacuation fleet, and the Helix, its flagship, was their last hope. It carried 5,000 survivors, leaders, laborers, children, and warriors, each a fragment of the civilization the Zalkar sought to obliterate. On the command deck, Kyle's square jaw tightened as he watched the final boarding through the hollow displays. He wore his uniform-like armor, his polished boots and crisp gray jacket a sharp contrast to the chaos surrounding him. Beside him stood Arden Chara, his second-in-command and childhood friend whose normally calm demeanor was now strained. "Last transport docked, Captain," Arden reported. His voice quivered. "We're the only shit left." Kyle nodded, his piercing blue eyes fixed on the main viewport. Below, Telvor's surface writhed with destruction. The Zalkar's main weapon, a massive crystalline device embedded deep in the planet's core, was nearing detonation. When it went off, it would tear Telvor apart. "Engage the orbital thrusters," Kyle commanded. "Take us out of range. Now." As the Helix ascended, the vast windows revealed a sight that seared into Kyle's mind. Telvor's oceans boiled away, its continents cracked open like brittle clay, and its people, millions who hadn't made it aboard, vanished in the maelstrom. A deafening silence settled over the bridge. "We're all that's left," whispered Arden, his voice barely audible. Kyle didn't respond. His heart pounded in his chest, but he refused to show it. Leaders couldn't afford doubt. He turned to face his crew, raising his voice above the growing tension. "We've lost our home," Kyle said, his voice clear and firm, "but we haven't lost our will. This ship, this mission, this is how Telvor lives on. Remember that? Now focus on your stations. We'll find a new world." The crew straightened, clinging to his confidence. But Kyle knew it was a fragile thing, held together only by his unwavering resolve. For weeks, the Helix drifted through the void. Every day brought new challenges. Supplies ran dangerously low and makeshift rationing measures were enacted. The Helix's once efficient systems groaned under the strain of constant operation. Kyle spent sleepless nights in the command center, his fingers dancing across interfaces as he pored over star maps. Each scan for habitable planets returned nothing but empty voids and radiation-filled worlds. "Still nothing?" Arden asked during one of their late-night shifts. He carried 2 cups of thick, bitter stimulant drink and set one in front of Kyle. Kyle shook his head. "Just debris fields and lifeless systems," Arden sighed, sitting down beside him. "You need to take a break. There's a whole crew out there who wants to help, but they're terrified. They need their captain to stay human, not turn into a machine." Kyle's lips twitched into a brief, dry smile. "They need their captain to find them a home. That's all that matters." Their conversation was interrupted by a loud chime. A new signal appeared on the ship's scanners, faint, barely perceptible, but unmistakably artificial. "Looks like a distress beacon," said Arden, leaning closer to the display. "Source?" Kyle asked, his voice instantly sharp with focus. "A derelict vessel adrift in a nearby system?" "It's old. No matching signatures in the database." Kyle leaned back in his chair, considering the options. "It's a risk, but we can't ignore it. Plot a course." When the Helix arrived at the source, the derelict vessel came into view. An enormous ship with a pitted and burned hull, its structure warped as though it had been partially melted. Its running lights flickered weakly, and a faint distress beacon pulsed in the darkness. Kyle organized a small team for an away mission, including Reinar Vale, the ship's chief engineer and a towering, pragmatic figure with a knack for solving impossible problems. As they boarded the vessel, Kyle's instincts screamed caution. The air inside was cold and still, and a faint, crystalline dust covered every surface. They found the crew quickly, what was left of them. Bodies littered the halls, twisted into grotesque shapes as though frozen mid-scream. Strange, glassy growths protruded from their bodies and scorch marks lined the walls. "This wasn't an accident," Reinar muttered, kneeling beside one of the corpses. "Something did this." Before they could investigate further, alarms blared aboard the Helix. Kyle's communicator crackled to life, Arden's voice urgent. "Kyle, we've got incoming. Zalkar fighters, 10 of them." "They must have been tracking the beacon," Kyle swore under his breath. "We're coming back." The away team scrambled back to the Helix as the alien ships descended. Kyle took command of the bridge, orchestrating a desperate defense. The Helix was severely outgunned, its weapon systems barely functional after weeks of disrepair. Kyle's tactical brilliance, however, proved decisive. Using debris from the derelict ship as cover, he maneuvered the Helix into an escape trajectory. The Zalkar were relentless, but Kyle's gambit worked. The Helix escaped, though not without damage. The battle left scars beyond the physical damage to the ship. The crew's morale plummeted and tensions erupted into open conflict. Kieran Lothar, a brash and hot-tempered pilot, accused Kyle of leading them into disaster. "You gambled with our lives for a ghost ship," Kieran shouted during a tense meeting in the mess hall. "You're going to get us all killed." Kyle stood his ground, his voice cold and commanding. "I made a choice to give us a fighting chance. I'll make that choice again if it means keeping us alive." Kieran sneered. "And what happens when we run out of luck, Captain?" The confrontation exposed cracks in the crew's unity, and Kyle felt their trust slipping away. Even Arden, his closest ally, began to question his decisions. Kyle's doubts deepened when he uncovered something troubling in the ship's navigational systems. The Helix trajectory wasn't natural. Star patterns repeated themselves in impossible ways, and their systems logged coordinates that seemed to shift without input. Kyle called Reinar to investigate. What they found chilled them both. "This isn't Telvoran tech," Reinar explained, pulling up data from the ship's core. "It's alien. Zalkar, to be specific." Kyle's stomach dropped. "What are you saying?" Reinar hesitated, then said, "The ship is compromised. We're not just traveling through space. We're in a simulation." As Kyle processed this, the ship's lights flickered, and a cold mechanical voice echoed through the corridors. "Observation complete. Prepare for extraction." Panic erupted as the Zalkar revealed themselves. Kyle realized the Helix had been a trap all along, a tool for the Zalkar to study their prey. Reinar proposed a desperate solution, overloading the ship's core to sever the simulation. However, it required direct interface with the alien systems, a process that could destroy the user's mind. Kyle volunteered without hesitation. "This is my responsibility. I'll see it through." Despite Arden's protests, Kyle entered the simulation's heart, where the Zalkar's influence was strongest. The experience was harrowing. The aliens used the simulation to torment Kyle with visions of Telvor's destruction, his failures magnified into grotesque nightmares. But Kyle's resolve proved stronger. He forced the simulation to collapse, severing the Zalkar's control and regaining autonomy over the ship. The Helix emerged from hyperspace into a new system. Before them lay a verdant, uncharted world, lush with greenery and teeming with life. Kyle, exhausted but victorious, stood on the bridge. "This isn't the end," he told his crew. "This is where we begin again." The survivors of Telvor descended to the surface, their hope rekindled. Though the scars of their journey ran deep, they were united in their determination to rebuild. And Kyle, haunted by the Zalkar's cruelty, swore to one day strike back and ensure no other world suffered the same fate.